A young woman vanished from a gift shop where she worked part-time. Days later, her disappearance became a shocking murder case that baffled the authorities for decades. The mystery remained unsolved as time passed silently, until a new prosecutor took over the case more than 20 years later and brought new hope. This is the story of the Agawam murder case that I will share with you today. Agawam is a town in Hampden County, in southern Massachusetts. It is bordered by the Connecticut River, the longest river in New England, on its east side. Agawam has a population of about 28,000 people, with a high per capita income and a low crime rate compared to its neighboring towns. It is a pleasant place to live. On April 15, 1992, a cool Wednesday, Lisa Ziegert, 24, went to work at Brittany Gift Shop as usual around 5 p.m. Lisa was a teacher by day and a clerk by night. She was beautiful and lively, with sparkling blue eyes. Everyone who knew her liked her. Her sister Lynn Ziegert was also a clerk at the shop and worked with her that afternoon. They chatted for a while before Lynn left for home. The next morning at 9:17, Lynn received a phone call from Lisa's school saying that Lisa had not shown up for work. This had never happened before. A few minutes later, Lynn got another call. This time it was from Kimberly, another colleague who worked in the morning shift at the gift shop. Kimberly said that when she arrived at work, she saw that the lights in the shop were still on, Lisa's car was parked outside, and her bag was on the counter, but there was no sign of her. Lynn felt something was wrong and feared that her sister might be in trouble. She decided to call the police. Lisa Ziegert was born on March 24, 1968 in Holyoke, Massachusetts. She was the second of 4 children in her family. In 1974, her parents George and Din Ziegert moved to Agawam with their children for work reasons. Besides Lynn, Lisa also had a brother David and a sister Sharon. Lynn was only 15 months older than Lisa, and they were very close since childhood. They did everything together, and were not only sisters, but also best friends. Lisa loved painting, but she often doubted her own talent. Luckily, she had an art teacher who encouraged her constantly and helped her get admitted to Bridgeport University. Lisa was very grateful to this teacher and inspired to become a teacher herself. After graduation, she earned a degree in elementary education from Westfield State University and found a job as a teaching assistant at Agawam Middle School. She got along well with the students and was popular among them for her warm and friendly personality. In her personal life, Lisa had a boyfriend Blair who adored her. They seemed to have a bright future ahead of them, and people expected them to get married soon. After Lisa disappeared, Lynn immediately told her mother Din about it. Din, who was usually calm and composed, panicked when she heard the news. They decided to go to the gift shop to see if they could find any clues. The gift shop was the last place Lisa was seen. She usually locked the door and hung a sign saying I'll be back soon if she had to go out while watching the store. But she didn't do that at all. She just left without any explanation. The police officers searched the gift shop thoroughly. There was no evidence of robbery. The cash register was untouched. Lisa's book was lying on a shelf as if she had put it down casually. There was no surveillance camera in the store, so the police had no way of knowing what had happened there. But in the back office area, they found signs of a struggle and some blood stains. The back door of the office area, which was normally closed, was open. It led to a back alley. Soon, many police officers and reporters gathered outside the gift shop. They wanted to know where Lisa had gone. The news on TV and newspapers spread quickly, covering the progress of the search for Lisa and some speculations from non-law enforcement people. The quiet town was shaken by a disappearance case. People felt scared and hoped to find out the truth as soon as possible. But days went by and the police still couldn't find Lisa. For Din and Lynn, those days were unbearable. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't focus or work normally. They knew that the longer Lisa was missing, the less likely she was to survive. April 19th was Easter Sunday, and also the 5th day of Lisa's disappearance. Lisa's family attended a mass that afternoon. Noah Pack, the police officer in charge of the case, knocked on the Ziegert's door after the mass. Din saw his serious expression and guessed that he had bad news. He did. He told them that a resident of Agawam had found a female body in the woods behind his house, and that the police had identified it as Lisa Ziegert. Din felt weak when she heard this news. All her hopes were shattered in an instant. She didn't even want to know the details of what had happened to her daughter. They were not important anymore. She only knew that her daughter would never come home again. The body was found about 2 kilometers from the gift shop, in an open space on the side of Highway 75. There was a secluded path there. The body was naked and had multiple stab wounds, including 4 fatal ones on her neck. Her hand showed signs of defense wounds, but no weapon was found at the scene. Lisa's clothes were found in a nearby bush, torn and with buttons missing. The forensic doctor confirmed that Lisa had been sexually assaulted before her death. They also extracted a male DNA sample from a single source from the scene and from Lisa's body. The disappearance case had turned into a murder case. The Agawam Police Department took this case very seriously, but they had less than 50 officers on duty and lacked the resources to handle such a case. Therefore, they reported the case to the state police and sought assistance. They also set up a special investigation team for this case. The state police came to the scene with dogs and helicopters. They further investigated the scene and the trash cans in the back alley and questioned the nearby residents. At the same time, they also announced some details of the case to the public through the media, trying to find potential witnesses. Among the many calls from witnesses, 3 of them provided valuable information. One witness claimed that he had been to the gift shop at 8:20 p.m. and Lisa was still in the store. Another witness, who had been to the store, said that when he went to the gift shop at 9 p.m., the store was empty. It was inferred that Lisa's disappearance time was between 8:20 p.m. and 9 p.m. The first witness also told the police that when he left the store, he saw a suspicious man walking back and forth across the street. The man was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket. He suspected that the man might want to steal a car, so he watched him for a while after getting in his car, but he didn't find anything unusual. When the police questioned Lynn and Kimberly, they also mentioned this man. He was not wandering across the street for the first time that night, and he had also been to the store to look at the goods a few days before the incident. He looked for a long time, but didn't buy anything. The man was tall and thin, with black hair and a black jacket. This matched the description of the witness very well. This was a valuable clue. The third witness was a lady who worked near the gift shop. At 9:15 p.m., she was on her way home. When she drove past Highway 75, she noticed a full-size SUV with a dark-colored body. She couldn't tell what color it was exactly because it was dark. The car turned from Highway 75 and headed towards the area where Lisa's body was found. She saw at least 1 man and 1 woman in the car. She didn't think anything was strange at that time, but she thought of this car after seeing the news and wondered if it had anything to do with the incident. The police extracted a plaster model of the tire marks at the murder scene based on this information. The tire combination of this car was very unique. The police quickly identified the owner of the car based on the sales records of local dealers. However, it turned out that during the time of the murder, the owner and 3 friends were in the car, and they had nothing to do with the incident. At Lisa's funeral, the police observed from a distance because it was not uncommon for killers to attend their victims' funerals. But they only saw Lisa's grieving family and friends, as well as children from school, and no suspicious people were found. Since the killer had not been caught yet, there was a subtle change in the whole town. Fewer people went out at night. Women's self-defense classes became popular. Families with daughters would pick them up from work, and everyone was scared. Most murderers are people known by their victims, so Lisa's male colleagues and friends were initially investigated by priority. Questioning Lisa's boyfriend Blair was a necessary procedure. Blair told police that he was at his mother's house on the night of incident. Although Blair's mother confirmed this, police still seized his car and interrogated him for a long time and investigated him, during which they also took his DNA sample. They also asked people who knew both of them, but everyone thought Blair treated Lisa well and had no tendency of domestic violence. And since Lisa disappeared, Blair had been looking for her. He had nothing suspicious about him. Eventually, Blair's suspicion was ruled out. The police took every clue seriously in the investigation of the case, but this also brought another problem. That was, the police received more and more calls that were based on hearsay, such as someone thinking a customer was strange, or an ex-husband who had been to the gift shop, and so on. The police would file and investigate all the information. In just a few days, more than 400 suspects were recorded. But a lot of useless information would consume the already tight police force. In order not to miss any clues and reduce the burden on the police, they prepared to use DNA extraction to reduce the number of people on the list. But at that time, DNA extraction was invasive, which meant that blood samples were needed. Not everyone was willing to do that. They had various concerns. More importantly, refusal was legal. By the way, at that time, DNA application in criminal proceedings was still in its infancy. The first conviction based on DNA evidence occurred in New York in 1988. The state's highest court did not uphold the verdict until 1994. And the Massachusetts State Court did not allow DNA to be used as evidence until 1997. In the following period of time, the police extracted samples from suspects who were willing to provide blood samples on the one hand, and checked those who refused on the other hand. Due to the large workload, the progress of the investigation was very slow. And as time went by, the number of police officers involved in the investigation of this case also decreased gradually. Gradually, this case became a cold case. But everyone remembered that a girl was killed on the eve of Easter, and the killer was still at large. Lisa's family had been hoping for years that DNA science could help solve the case. In 1995, Lisa's parents George and Din donated $1,100 to Agawam Middle School to buy equipment for genetics courses. In 2002, when Lisa's 10th anniversary of death was approaching, Din decided to set up a memorial fund to ensure that her daughter would not be forgotten and created a website for it to showcase its mission and goals. In 2005, Din generously donated $10,000 to Agawam Library to buy books as a way of expressing gratitude to Ziegert's family. Someone created a mural in the library to commemorate these donations from a family that had been hurt and their good deeds. However, as time went by, Ziegert's family felt more and more hopeless about finding the killer. Time came to 2015, when it had been 23 years since Lisa was killed. People's memory of this case had become more and more vague, and even thought that the killer might be dead. But Din still called the police station every year to inquire about the progress of the case. She hoped to find her daughter's killer in her lifetime. In May of the same year, Anthony Guglielmi, the youngest local prosecutor in state history, took office and gave this case a new hope. Anthony first heard about this case when he was a 10-year-old kid. He was amazed when he learned that this case had not been solved after he took office. To some extent, this matter had been bothering Agawam town and those who had experienced it. It was very important for many people. Anthony made a promise to Lisa's family that he would do his best to understand this case in his career. Anthony learned that there were hundreds of suspects and thousands of pages of case records in this case, which was a serious murder case that occurred in a town with good public security. And this case had DNA samples left by the killer. He was confident in his promise. After 23 years, today's DNA technology has advanced by leaps and bounds. Among them, phenotypic analysis can use DNA to infer some physical characteristics, such as hair color, skin color, eye color, etc., which will help narrow down the scope of investigation. In 2017, the crime laboratory analyzed the DNA extracted from suspects at that time and drew a composite sketch based on it. It also included possible birthplaces, bloodlines, and even freckle colors. With these specific features, most of the suspects on the list can be eliminated, especially those who refused to provide DNA samples and were not excluded from the list. After careful verification by the police, the list of 400 suspects was finally reduced to 11. This was a task that had not been completed for years. Now the prosecutor Anthony had enough reasons to explain to the grand jury why these 11 people were suspects. And the easiest way to clear the suspicion was to provide DNA. The grand jury voted to ask the court to force these people to provide samples. On September 13, 2017, the police delivered the DNA search warrant to the 11 suspects. The next day, September 14, a woman walked into the state police station. She told the police that she came from Westfield. That morning, she saw a confession letter written by her boyfriend on her desk. It mentioned apologizing to the Ziegert family because he had taken Lisa away 25 years ago and regretted it. Such a specific clue had never been seen before. This was an important turning point in this case. The police went to Westfield that day, and they got a 4-page handwritten letter. The content was that the writer believed that the police had obtained the DNA search warrant, and he was one of the 11 suspects. The description in the letter was more detailed than what the woman said. He narrated how he kidnapped, assaulted, and killed Lisa that year and reiterated that this was true. The police talked to the woman who reported the crime. She described her boyfriend as a gentle person who looked very ordinary. She would never associate him with crime before seeing these letters. His name was Gary Scara, 48 years old at that time. The police confirmed that Gary Scara was one of the 11 suspects. Gary was not at home at that time and his girlfriend didn't know where he went. In the process of looking for Gary, Anthony reviewed the case again. Gary entered the list of suspects in March 1993, which was 11 months after Lisa was killed. The phone records showed that the woman who called at that time was Joyce, Gary's wife. She thought her husband was suspicious. Because their divorce lawsuit at that time was very controversial, it made the police think that Joyce's report might be to make people doubt her husband's credibility. Therefore, Gary had a low priority among many suspects. The police did not interrogate Gary in 1993. He was just one of those who refused to provide DNA. In 2002, investigators had talked to Gary, but he still refused to provide DNA. And in another conversation in 2008, it was recorded by a video camera. At that time, when talking about the gift shop and Lisa, Gary said that he had never been to that gift shop and did not know Lisa. He learned about this case from the media like others. In the video, you can see that Gary was very careful. He not only refused to provide DNA, but also did not drink any water provided by the police during the whole conversation, and did not touch anything with his hands. And his reason for refusal was fear of being cloned. This conversation did not make any progress, and the police did not increase their suspicion of him. Gary's ex-wife Joyce died in 2014. At 9:50 p.m. on September 14th, the police located him through Gary's cell phone signal. He was in Stafford Springs, Connecticut. Investigators found Gary's car in a hospital parking lot. He had attempted suicide by taking a large amount of non-prescription drugs and was sent to the hospital. His condition was stable and not life-threatening. After his condition improved, police officers interrogated Gary in his ward. He looked calm, as if he knew this day would come. But he refused to answer any questions before his lawyer came. The next day, after obtaining a search warrant, the police searched Gary's home. His toothbrush was sent to the crime laboratory. While waiting for the comparison results, everyone was very eager. Police officer Mark Vander clearly remembered when his phone lit up and showed a call from Concord, Massachusetts. He was thrilled because that was where the state crime lab was located. On the phone, Mark got the exact news that the DNA extracted from the toothbrush matched the male DNA from that year. The police immediately told the Ziegert couple the exciting news. And the sheriff, who notified them, was Noah, who had informed Den of Lisa's body back then. He was no longer the young officer he used to be, but Noah still wanted to personally inform the Ziegert family. There was no doubt that this was one of the most meaningful moments in his life. Lisa's family finally got the long-awaited good news 25 years after the case. Gary Scara was charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated assault, and first-degree murder. He wore a red jumpsuit and stood behind a glass window to receive the arraignment. His expression did not change at all. In the following trial, Gary refused to admit his guilt because the police had no other evidence chain besides DNA evidence to prove that he was related to this case. Now the police needed more evidence to prove that Gary was the culprit who killed Lisa. Soon, the police found new evidence in Gary's home, a porcelain piece. This product was only sold in Lisa's gift shop, which proved that Gary lied when he said he didn't know Lisa. And in the confession letter at home, he described the crime details that the police had never made public. With strong DNA evidence, Anthony was confident to prosecute Gary for the crimes he was charged with. However, as Anthony prepared to prosecute Gary, there was a new development in the case. On September 25, 2019, Gary Scara decided to plead guilty on the advice of his defense lawyer. They did not think that refusing to admit guilt would gain any advantage. Gary admitted to kidnapping, assaulting, and killing Lisa in front of everyone. He was finally sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. This 27-year nightmare finally ended on this day. Lisa had been away longer than she had been in this world, but for her mother Den, Lisa's appearance and smile were still vivid in her mind.